Welcome to the Filmmaker Mixer Podcast, the podcast by filmmakers for filmmakers.
This episode is sponsored by Gemini Crown Tech, software for all of your production needs. Stay tuned for more information later in the show. Hello, everybody. This is the Filmmaker Mixer Podcast, and today we chat with Nicola Rose, writer and director of Magnetosphere, which at the time of this recording just premiered yesterday, I think. If that's correct, Nicola will correct me if I'm wrong. But Nicola, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So it did just premiere, correct?
Yeah, it just dropped yesterday morning on streaming on a whole bunch of platforms across North America, including Amazon Prime and Apple TV and a whole bunch of other platforms as well. And if you were to go to our distributor's website, Freestyle Digital Media, they would have like the 9 other platforms it's on.
That's cool. That's exciting. Well, just for context for the conversation, for the people who are listening or watching, give us the pitch. What is Magnetosphere about?
Sure. Magnetosphere is a coming of age comedy about a 13-year-old girl who is discovering, as we meet her, that she has synesthesia, which is a neurodivergence or neurological condition where your senses are combined such that you might end up seeing sound or hearing color or tasting shapes or like thinking that the days of the week have certain colors or personalities. And it's a thing that a ton of people have to some degree, but some people have it in a much more, shall I say, overwhelming way than others. And they might have like several forms of synesthesia or several modalities, whatever we might call them, such that it can be disruptive even to their life. It might enhance your life too. It might, enable you to, as it does with her, to see the world in like a heightened and special sort of way. But it is not all roses and pink sparkles the way that one of our promo images absolutely says it is. That's because it's a good promo image. It also shows how it interferes with and disrupts her life. And she's already 13, which means her life is already interfered with and disrupted with on the daily. So, as you can imagine, it's a tough time.
13 is such an easy time for kids, isn't it?
Grades, remember it like it was yesterday.
So, where did this idea come from?
Synesthesia was something that had fascinated and interested me for a while, but it was very much in the back of my mind until I started really getting going on, making a second feature film, because this was my second feature film as a writer-director. And I came back to that idea through different conversations and with friends and so forth. And I wanted to kind of set myself the cinematic challenge of how can I depict this on screen? Like, obviously, there's many kinds of synesthesia and there's many modalities, and some of them are not so screen friendly. But this one, like there's a type called lexical gustatory, which is where you taste words. And the more I use that as a counterexample, the more I think, well, you could totally show that on screen with special effects. And you could. But I think ones that are strictly visual and auditory, since basically we're introducing synesthesia to a majority of people who probably won't have heard of it. So kind of the straightest line between 2 points is to say, hey, her synesthesia is mainly auditory, mainly visual, associated with feelings, associated with emotions as triggers to like hear a color or see a sound, or you'll see the movie, you'll see how it works. It makes sense. It makes sense in her mind anyway.
I'm curious. So did when you were trying to write this movie, did the idea of synesthesia come first, or maybe the story in the film intrigue you first, if that makes any sense at all?
Oh, it makes total sense. And it's funny you should ask that particular question, because I apologize if things are very loud where I am. I hope my sound is okay here.
No, you're good.
Okay, I'm very near an airport and I'm very near a lot of roads. So I'm like up high on a balcony of a condo here out at Comic-Con promoting the movie. But anyway, you asked, did the story of the girl come first, or did the synesthesia come first? Fact is, the story of the girl came 18 years before the story of the synesthesia.
Oh, wow.
When I was about 15, I wrote what was basically a story about a girl growing up, and that was the pitch. Like, it was pretty dull by itself. Like, it wasn't dull if you're 15 writing it, but it pretty dull to anybody else watching from the outside. It was basically just like she grows up, she hits these milestones, she falls in love for the first time, blah blah blah. The synesthesia thing by itself was so interesting, and that by itself, sorry, then you have the girl growing up story, which I kind of came back to because I remembered it, and I was like, this would be actually the perfect sort of framework for the synesthesia thing, because you've got here, what is sort of a very sort of well plotted structure. It's just that it needs something actually interesting going on. So basically what happened was, like, 18 years prior, I had written what I thought was this great, great work, and eight, and 18 years later, write the outline of this other story about a child with synesthesia, and I realized, hey, if I like merge these two together, which is not to say that there wasn't much massaging of elements and so forth, but basically, then it became a good story. You don't need like a complex story. You actually it's just, if something really complex were happening outside of the synesthesia, I actually think this would be too busy of a movie, too complicated. As it is, we do have a couple subplots going on that involve, what her father is doing and so forth. And there's like basically four main plots to the film, or five if you, anyway. Point is, there's quite enough with growing up without having to add in, some sort of thriller intrigue or something that, like, I probably wouldn't naturally write anyway. So I'm probably not the guy.
Well, you mentioned you wrote this when you were, did you say 15?
Well, I wrote a story about a girl
Right,
growing
right.
up.
But I mean the
Yeah.
story. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I
Yeah.
meant. So you wrote the story when you were 15. So
I was a prodigy.
yeah,
Yes,
what
that
I what I was going to ask is, were you interested in writing movies at that time or short stories? How did you get interested in writing at such a young age?
Yeah, actually even earlier, I had my mom's friend had a book at her house, because at this time, you weren't even like naturally Googling things. It existed, but it wasn't like the go-to. And she had a couple of books on how to write screenplays, like what was screenplay format, and I was very interested in writing, I think specifically for TV. So I went in and looked at these books and like sort of studied, oh, okay, how to do this. And at that time there was no we didn't have like a final draft, which is sort of the screenwriting industry standard program that, people write screenplays on. So I think I went into Microsoft Word and got the margins just right, and in this totally neurotypical way fussed over it until, each line was correct, and God knows. Anyway, that's how I spent my days, learning to write for, I can't speak to the content, but I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. It was very prolific in those days. Setting me up for later. Um, yeah, I was very interested. I think I was more interested in writing screenplays. In fact, I think I wrote several full-length screenplays that you and I definitely would not want to see, in those years,
You got to
long
start
before.
somewhere, right?
That's what they tell me.
I'm curious, with you working with such a young cast,
Yeah.
what your process was like. I'm not sure. You said this is your second feature. I'm not sure if your first feature also centered around a young cast, but I'm curious kind of what your process is in guiding with them specifically.
This all comes down to casting. And as a first side note, you asked about my first feature, Goodbye Petrushka, which is out and streaming on a whole bunch of platforms, depending where you are in the world. It's somewhere, Goodbye Petrushka. But it does feature a young cast, but it's like barely a coming of age. It's a 19-year-old kind of finding her way in the world. So it's a later coming of age kind of thing. Not and the actress was like 24, 25, so not the same directing, actually a very similar directing process, but there is something special about child actors who are really natural child actors, like Shaylin Martin, who played Maggie, who's kind of exhibit A for this in Magnetosphere, because she's just so natural at what she does and so instinctive at what she does. There's nothing there's nothing cerebral going on there, which I'm so grateful for, because it's just all from the guts. It's like this process with her, if she describes it as, or just kind of become the character. And, I mean, that is what it should be. You shouldn't be thinking too hard about it. And it never pays to think too hard about any of this, or else you start, looking at yourself instead of looking out from within, and you're looking the wrong direction.
So when you came up with this concept and when you were working on the script, when it came to translating the script into the final film, what was the strategy behind making all of this visual within the film? I know you use animation and different things. What was that process? Was that always your idea, or did you go through a process of trying to figure out the best way to make this whole thing visual?
Oh no, I think I always had the animations kind of in mind from the beginning because I'm not sure that there are any practical effects that really, like truly non-VFX effects that would have worked to get across what we need to get across. So it was just a matter of what do we want them to look like? And so I went through a process of doing my level of drawing, which is to say really bad drawing, and handed it off to my good friend Tommy Cha, who does excellent drawing. He's a wonderful cartoonist and animator. He's first rate at everything he does. And I said, "Okay, Tommy, can we make it look like this?" And so he had it. The VFX team had it, and it was the VFX team's job in along the way to make everything look as much as possible like the drawings Tommy had made, the good drawings Tommy had made of the bad drawings I had made. And I think through these many, as it went up the chain of many layers of development or abstraction or whatever you want to call it, we came up with something that was no, I don't want to say in the ballpark because that sounds like, oh, it's not what I wanted, but nothing is ever exactly as you imagine it. But this, I was sold when I saw it. I thought, yeah, this feels organic. This feels like it had to be two things. The Venn diagram it had to feel organic, but it also had to have visual appeal. It also had to sort of make you look at it and go, ooh, shiny things. So um if it looks really, really dull, that is appropriate some places like that. I don't think is a spoiler to say there's a moment in the movie where several moments where she looks at things that she's unhappy about, mainly having to do with herself, her self-image, her appearance, and she sees like a brown, crappy cloud kind of form over either her face or her hand or whatever she's looking at on herself. And obviously that had to be very distinct from pleasant pink sparkles that might come from listening to music, certain piece of music or whatever.
I'm curious, kind of when you were getting this project off the ground, was it mostly about getting that style down, like you're talking about with the synesthesia first, or was it more just like I guess trying to reframe the question. Were you
Yeah.
going to were you set on trying to maybe visually show synesthesia before making sure you wanted this is the project you wanted to get off the ground? Or was it something where you were kind of pushing the script, you got funding, and then you were going to tackle the synesthesia, if that makes any sense at all?
Yeah, it does. I'm trying to think, I'm looking back over the course of several years here, and I'm trying to remember what order these things happened in. I think I had set myself the challenge of let's depict synesthesia on screen first, and then I had sort of relegated that to, and we'll think about how to do it later. Now let's write the script and cast some people. So I think uh, the answer to your question is yes, the idea of depicting synesthesia came first. The idea of how to depict it was much later down the line. I was just like, we'll get there when we get there. We'll worry about it when we worry about it. And obviously when we worried about it was well before the VFX was ever done because we had to shoot these things in certain light at certain angles with certain amounts of space left so that like if it's in the trailer, she spins around and she can see the line that she's left when she spun her, like if that makes sense, she can see the line where she twirled around when she turns around to look behind her. Um, and we had to shoot that so that the VFX guys could like make that spiral. So you're having to sort of pre-imagine what's going to be there.
Did you use any animatics with the cast? Did they get to see what this was going to look like when it was going to be finished?
I don't recall that off the top of my head. I don't think that happened, but my memory is not foolproof, so good question. I will say no.
Well, let's pivot over to something else. So you've done a
Yeah.
previous feature, and as we mentioned at the top of the show, this particular film just came out. I'm curious what your strategy was for distribution. I'm presuming you didn't have distribution before you started the film. Maybe you did.
He did not. A few indies do.
Yeah.
That's kind of the name of the game of being an indie.
So what was your strategy? Was it festivals, build a brand around the film, or build, word of mouth around the film? Tell us how you managed to get your distribution deal.
I believe that we started working with our sales rep, Glenn Reynolds of Circus Road Films, right around the time that we started pitching to festivals. But he was working with us, I think, more to, he may correct me later, but I believe he was working with us more on the side of finding distribution than on the side of actually getting us in. Yeah, no, no, no. He wasn't like helping with getting into festivals. I mean, if he had a contact, then great, but I don't think that had anything ultimately to do. I think our festival acceptances had more to do with festivals that had like a niche that was appropriate for this film. um, it was actually a very difficult film to place in festivals because most festivals, and I would never have predicted this because I had not done a family feature before. My other one being like PG-13, it's about young adults. It's kind of not the same exactly. Genre-wise, it's close, but not. This one being a family film, it turns out that a lot of festivals, I would hear this from people. It's like, oh, it's good, we like it, but we're not going to be able to get families to come in for a 2 p.m. film. And the thing is, it's not actually a children's film. So, in my head, I'm like, why don't you show it at 8 like any other, but this is not up to me. And the way they look at it, the way a lot of people look at a film about a child, and especially about, it's a few things. If it's about a child, that's a mark against it. If it's about a little girl, it's another mark against it. I don't know if people realize they do this. And then there's
Really,
a
I did. That's interesting. And how did you figure this out? Just I mean, did you have
basically,
talks with the festival programmers or?
it's not just with festival programmers, but with other folks, producers and salespeople and distributors along the way who are basically just saying, yeah, no, it's about a little girl and we can't do, there's no market for family, blah, blah, blah. I think there's only no market for family if you say there's no market for family, because there are always all these people saying, where are the films we can watch together? Where are these films we can watch with
Hmm.
kids? And I think, well, they're not letting them be made. That's, you know, um, they're not getting money. People are, somebody wrote a glowing review of this thing yesterday saying, I think we all know by now that, when we see something, we wonder, why isn't this at all the multiplexes? It's because obviously the money is not being given to small. I'm kind of getting off track of the whole genre thing here, but small film, people are not giving, you're not making a small film, especially in the United States, without basically people who think a lot of you and a lot of your work, giving you their money. And that is an incredible thing to do that they do not have to do. And they do it.
Hmm.
And I have somehow gotten them to do it twice. I do not believe I will ever have that kind of luck again. I do not want to push my luck here. It's kind of incredible. There are some countries that obviously support it more, Canada in the form of grants, and which we were very lucky to get for a large part of Magnetosphere, and so forth. But it's still a tiny budget because the studio money is going toward exactly what you think. It's going toward the superhero movies. It's going toward the reboots. And people wonder, why do we only see those two things? Well, that's where the money is, because nobody nobody really cares about the things that niches want to see. They care about the things that the overarching public wants to see, because which only makes sense, but it makes for a really poverty-stricken landscape of stuff.
Hmm.
Just
Yeah, I mean, so just to clarify, the film festival route, you had trouble with the film because of the, young girl and being a family movie, and you're saying you also had trouble in the distribution route as well, or was it less
sorry,
trouble
no,
in the
just less
distribution?
trouble with distribution. With distribution, what you run into more is people not wanting to look at indies.
Hmm.
Again, is understandable from the point of view of if you're a distributor, because if you're a distributor, like your Lionsgate, your Netflix, you're somebody major, you are looking for A-lister films, films with A-list talent in them, whether it's a searing drama or a wacky comedy or whatever it is, you're looking for stuff that has names and will sell and, will make millions and millions and millions of dollars. So, the chances are, if you are an indie, that you are going to get especially if it's a small indie, even if it has names in it, which by the way ours does, but they're not the kind of names that will get you on the front page of they should be, but they're not the kind of names that get you on the front page of THR or whatever. The point being, the distribution offers you will get are from the companies that actually take a look at smaller films and say, hey, this might be marketable, and there are a few that do that there, but they're very distinctive in that they do that. That should not be the case, but it is because, they're not looking at the bottom line in the same way. I understand it from both points of view. I will say that.
Well, you mentioned cast, and you do have
Yeah.
great cast, including
Yeah.
Colin Mockery, who I love. How did you get your cast? Did you go through traditional routes with casting director, that kind of thing?
No, I went more directly through their representatives for the most part. So I didn't have a casting director working on this. You'll if you look closely, you'll see no casting director is credited. That's because I did the casting directly. I actually have worked in casting on and off on a freelance basis, mostly in New York City for the past 13 years. But if your name pops up enough in the credits, it's only enough time, only so many times before people start referring to Tommy Wiseau and making jokes at you. I just said, let's just leave this out. I already edited the film. I do also edit professionally, but people will not assume that as soon as they see, oh, you're also the editor.
Hmm. I totally
So,
get it.
that is like seven places down the list from where it would normally be. I would prefer people did not even think about that because
Sure.
like if you pay any attention, it's well edited, but it's not something for some reason people look I feel like I'm saying a lot of things with a negative pregnance right now, and I really don't mean to, but just as we're I feel that this has nothing to do with me personally, but I feel that there's a weird negativity in how people look at creatives or business people who wear a lot of hats and say, maybe it's time for you to stop wearing so many hats, even if the work is good.
But I mean, indie film is about wearing a lot of hats. It's just that
How
Yeah.
just
else do they
comes
get
with
it
territory.
done?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
exactly.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, Andrew just finished a feature we did together, and
Oh,
yeah, I
cool.
mean everybody wears a lot of hats. That's just the nature of the game. But before we wrap up, tell everybody where they can see your film.
Absolutely. So, Amazon Prime, Apple TV, Sling, Xbox. I'm trying to remember all that here. I'm going to look up a picture as we're speaking of all the different platforms where you can see it in this is in North America. Fortunately, I have this link on my computer right in front of me as we speak.
What a
Okay,
coincidence.
you ready? All right,
Yes.
Prime Video, Apple TV. What does that say? Uverse on demand. DirecTV, Dish, Vudu, Fandango at home, Fios, Google Play, Spectrum, YouTube, Xbox, Xfinity, on DVD, on Amazon, and oh God, something warehouse. I'm so sorry. Amazon anyway. What does this say? Movie Zing Warehouse. Okay, Movie Zing Warehouse. It's Zing spelled with a Y. If you don't want to give Jeff Bezos money, you can get the DVD by giving somebody else deserving, I'm sure, money. And then streaming on Hoopla.
And if people want to follow your career, do you have a website or a social media account that you announce projects?
Yeah,
And
for Magnetosphere, the Instagram is at Magnetosphere Movie, and I am at Nicola Rose Directs. Do you want me to spell those things, or we good?
I
I
think
can do
we
it.
can, yeah, we can. I think it shouldn't be too difficult to find. But well, that's
Yeah.
awesome. That's awesome. Well,
Thank you.
congratulations on getting the film made and getting it out to
Thank
the world.
you.
Just like I said, just within the last day or so. So that's exciting.
Yeah, it's been I realize this represents in the indie film world, this is actually pretty rapid from concept to completion, from
Hmm.
concept to release is like, just over 3 years, 3.5 years. It's nothing, but it really does feel like a long process.
Well,
Oh, especially when you wear a lot of hats.
Well, yeah, there's that too. It will
Yeah.
put heavily on you. But, I'm all for people wearing many hats. I don't think that's a negative or something that should be derided. If they wear them badly, that is something that perhaps should be discussed at some point with
Yeah. Yeah.
I do believe that. I do believe, but I had somebody say not long ago, well, maybe it's time for you to stop like producing the films. And I'm like, do you realize that meant personal monetary investment in the film? Which it would not have been made. Or are you trying to say it shouldn't have been made? But people take that as that you were somehow actively, cracking the whip every day to get everybody to do everything and legal and financial. No, that's the actual producers. That's not me. There's no way
Hmm.
I could be doing that. Anyway, I
well,
wish.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
no.
I'm curious about something else. What are you working on
Yeah.
next?
Oh, I don't know. I'm taking a health break at the
Taking a
moment.
break?
Yeah, we'll see. It'll become clear. It
Well,
hasn't
very
quite
good.
clarity yet.
Well, you said you're at Comic-Con, so I hope you enjoy that. And yeah, circle back sometime. When you're working on something new, let us know. We'll chat again.
That would be lovely. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you having me.
All right, you take care.
You too.
Thank you.
This episode is sponsored by Gemini Crown Tech, owned and operated by Stephanie Moore and Stephanie Harrison. We at Gemini Crown Tech have covered all your production management needs with our proprietary software. Please visit our website at www.geminicrowntech.com and use the code FMP for Filmmaker Mixer podcast listeners, so we know how you heard about us.
Thank you for listening to the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, a podcast created and hosted by filmmakers Jeff Stolen and Andrew Lamping and produced by Melody Lopez.
Our theme song was composed by Stephen D. Bennett.
Make sure to follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us on, and stay tuned for future episodes.